Hey guys, and welcome to another episode. As you can see, I have my white screen set up. I just got a couple of new lights, and I was testing to see what kind of image I could get out of it. I'm pretty happy with how it's turning out so far. Almost looks like one of those Apple commercials, where they say words like, revolutionary, and innovative, and it just works. Yeah, that's a total knockoff, but I'm just having a bit of fun. Anyway, today's just going to be a quick episode. We're going to do a build on a soldering iron holder. So I got a text message from one of my friends, and it went something like this. Hey, would an old heatsink from a computer be sufficient for absorbing and diffusing the heat from a soldering iron? Follow-up, do you have a spare one? Now after chatting with him for a bit, I determined all he really wanted was a soldering iron holder. Well, I use something like this, and I've used it for many years, and it's always worked well for me. Then I thought it wouldn't be that hard to build something like that. So, let's get to the build. So this project is really simple. All you're going to need is a couple needle nose pliers and a coat hanger. The first thing I did was to clip off the hook from the coat hanger, as I wasn't going to need this part. Next, I started to straighten out the coat hanger to make it easier to work with, but after making my second one, I found out that this step was not really necessary. Now comes the long and tedious part. It's time to make your coil. Make sure you take your time on this part, as it is the most important part of the build. At a certain point, I found it was just easier just to use my hands. After about 4 coils or so, it was time to move on to the base. It took just a couple of 90-degree bends to make the base. Don't worry about getting it perfect, as we will be coming back for fine-tuning. Alright, this is taking too long. Double time! Alright, this base should hold just for now. Let's move back onto the coil and do some fine tweaking. I threw in the solder iron just to see what we had to work with. Looks like we're going to need to make it a lot smaller. From this point on, it all comes down to some fine-tuning. Put the soldering iron in, check the size, do an adjustment, check the size, do an adjustment, check the size, and so on. Now the important thing you're going to want to do is to make sure that the iron is not going to be touching the holder while it's inside. Otherwise the holder will be bleeding off a lot of the heat from the soldering iron, and that's not what you want. And once I was satisfied with how the iron was sitting in the holder, I then moved on to adjusting the base. Based on my adjustments of the coil, I determined that the base was much too short and I had to lengthen it. There we go, that's looking a lot better. And as you can see, the iron isn't touching any part of the coil. Now this is the completely optional step, but I took some sandpaper and I removed a bunch of the paint from the part of the holder that the iron would be heating up the most. Another couple of tests to make sure the iron wasn't contacting the holder, and it was now ready for delivery. Now let's do a quick comparison against a real soldering iron holder. This is the one I've had for many years. It's pretty old, as you can probably tell. As you can see by the coil design, the iron actually never comes in contact with it. Now this one is the actual first one I made that I delivered to my friend. The soldering iron can actually be placed in the coil quite loosely. Unfortunately, if you look here, the iron actually comes in contact with the coil. Now, the downside about this is that the heat is going to start to bleed off. So I took a little extra time and care to make sure that I could snap the iron in, and it fits quite snugly. And now we're no longer contacting the coil. So as you can see, this is just a basic design with plenty of room for some upgrades. But as you can see, it also works pretty good too. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you tune in again for another episode. Take care.